Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Thursday evening. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms, so go ahead and subscribe to me there. Also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me on Sundays, Tuesdays, and typically on Thursdays. So if you guys would like to, you guys can always subscribe to Revolutionary Blackout Network. Just to let you guys know, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in today. If you guys would like to, you guys can also get Substack notifications in your email so that whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles, you guys can get those straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So you guys can just go to jaybefaunt.substack.com for those notifications. So just wanted to say hello to everybody before we get into what we need to get into. So saying hello to all my peeps that are watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, Rockfin, and Rumble. So thank you so very much. What are we going to be talking about this evening? Well, we're doing a reading. Just like always, we're going to be reading Assata Shakur's Autobiography. So we're going to be reading that. It's chapters 18 and 19 of Assata Shakur's Autobiography. So if you guys are here for that, welcome, welcome, welcome. Just to let you guys know, I will be starting on page 244. So I cannot believe we're almost finishing up with this, but I'm excited. I hope you are too. This is going to be an interesting portion. We're reaching the end of this book, so I'm excited. And I have some house cleaning things to tell you guys towards the end, but just stay tuned. And I have an announcement too. So just to let you guys know. All right, so let's begin. After my acquittal in the Queens Bank robbery case in Brooklyn federal court on January 16, 1976, I was brought back to New Jersey, placed in the same basement of the Middlesex County Jail for men in solitary confinement, and held there for more than a year until the Jersey trial was over. Lennox Hines, then the head of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, together with other members of the defense team, filed a civil suit against the state, charging that my conditions were cruel and inhumane. After a long, drawn-out court battle, both sides agreed that a hearing officer should review my jail conditions and make a ruling. The hearing officer was a man named Ploshnik, who was appointed by the state. We had no say whatsoever in who was appointed, and therefore expected the decision to be favorable to the state. But he surprised everybody and ruled that my conditions of imprisonment were indeed inhumane and recommended that they be changed at once. But through a series of appeals and legal maneuvers, the state succeeded in keeping me confined in that basement. When the government finds it convenient to follow its own laws and administrative procedures, it does. And when it finds that these same laws are inconvenient to their own purposes, it simply ignores them. Think about a lot of people who are going through what they're going through, like, for instance, Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, Mumia Abu-Jamal. Just think about all those different people who are, just because they decided to basically show the issues of the American government, then what happens? Well, they try to do whatever they can to dismiss you or to put you in chains, so to speak. But if you commit a war crime, for the state, then they'll try to cover it up as much as possible. Interesting. I decided that I wanted Stanley Cohen and Evelyn to work together on the case. This turned out to be a mistake, since they were not exactly in love with each other. Neither Stanley nor Evelyn was a New Jersey lawyer, and we had to get a New Jersey lawyer to be on the case. Ray Brown was busy with other commitments and couldn't possibly do it. Stanley asked a young white New Jersey lawyer named Stuart Ball, and after some reservations, he agreed to be the admitting lawyer. Stanley also wanted a young lawyer, Lawrence Stern, to act as his assistant. Even though Evelyn was involved in the case and Lennox was handling the civil suit around my prison conditions, the Conference of Black Lawyers assigned a young black lawyer from Mississippi named Lewis Myers to work on the case. I was delighted. Everyone knew that the New Jersey trial was the big one, and that my chances of receiving a fair trial were about slim to none. So the strategy was to try to surround the defense team with as much resources and expertise as possible. It sounded like a good idea, but if there was ever a case of too many cooks in the kitchen, this was it. Almost from the beginning, the defense team was the best beset by personality conflicts. The problems were magnified greatly by the fact that nobody was being paid. The lawyers there were having problems covering even the bare expenses. It seemed like every other month, one or another of the lawyers were asking the judge to be relieved from the case. We were in dire need of experts. We needed to find a ballistics expert and a forensic chemist, among others, to refute the state's charges. We were also in desperate need of an investigator to locate some of the doctors who had treated me while I was hospitalized and other potential witnesses. We fought and harped on the point until finally the judge, Theodore Appleby, issued an order that the state pay for the experts. But once we got the order, we found that we were in the same position that we started from. Without expectation, everybody that we went to for help, without exception, everybody we went to for help turned us down. The types of experts we needed almost always are police or are working for police agencies. Because my case involved the murder of a police officer, none of them would touch the case. The most crucial part of the prosecutor's case was the scientific testimony alleging that I had huge amounts of dead state troopers' blood on me. We wanted someone who knew what they were doing to go over every inch of those clothes, to check out what was on them, and also to check out what had been done to them. But we could not find one forensic chemist to work for us, let alone testify for us. They would never be able to work in the peace for any police agency. People never hear about this side of the trial, but there is no place there's no place a defendant in criminal trial can go find experts in sciences commonly known as police sciences. The police can virtually write up a report saying anything they want. There is no way of refuting it. And there have been cases where experts have been double agents, working for a defendant while secretly working with the prosecutor. One of the amazing things was the number of student supporters who gave their time and energy to help us. They volunteered to index and organize past transcripts, and together, the political activists did a survey of prospective jurors in Middlesex County. Members of the defense committee published a bulletin to keep people informed about what was happening in the case, and also did speaking engagements and fundraising. People circulated petitions and demonstrated in front of the courtroom. They volunteered to do typing, handle the telephones, etc. Entertainers like Harry Belafonte, Ossie Davis, and Ruby Dee performed at fundraising events. Poets like June Jordan, Andre Lord, and Sonia Sanchez, among others, gave poetry readings. Political activists like Angela Davis and Amari Baraka worked hard to educate the people on what was happening in New Jersey. When Angela Davis came to New Jersey to do a speaking engagement on my behalf, the New Jersey prosecutor's office ambushed her and her party, harassing them until the moment they left the state. She tried to visit me at jail. Not only did the judge forbid her to visit me, but he stopped all of my other visits as well. One of the most moving statements I have ever heard was a speech Judge Bruce Wright made at fundraising rally for me. Judge Bruce Wright is a black judge who was removed from the criminal court bench in New York because he was too fair and honest, and he did something that was unforgivable. He set poor people's bail at amounts they could afford to pay. The courts will never be anything but a tool of repression until there are judges like Bruce Wright presiding over Black people's trials. Just a note to add there. This is why people like the state attorney that was elected into my county, she was fired by Ron DeSantis for being lenient on people, especially that are marginalized. So, State Attorney Monique Worrell was fired for being lenient on the marginalized people in my county. So, if you're like that, even if you try to be fair and just, the system doesn't like that. That's why it needs to change. There are many, many people who I never got to meet, even though they worked hard on my behalf. And even though I never got a chance to thank all the Black people, white people, third world people, all of the students, feminists, revolutionaries, activists, etc., who worked on the case, I thank you now. A lot of the pretrial conferences had to do nothing more than the defense making motions and the judge denying them. Every time we went to the court, the judge made a point of reading into the court that I had refused to stand up for him. He was one of those racist white dogs who really believed he was massa. He really took that your honor stuff seriously. If he could have made people bow to him and kiss his hand, he would have done it. He claimed that he was the stickler for the decorum of the courtroom. Plenty decorum, but not a bit of justice. Stand for him? It was out of the question. He was a real dyed-in-the-wool cracker, the kind that would send to wipe out the natives in Africa, make Central America safe for United Fruit Company, or run a sterilization center in Puerto Rico. Stanley Cohen came to see me. He was excited and upbeat. His good news was that he had found an investigator, an old friend of his, who owed him a favor. His friend had contacts with the New Jersey State Police and thought they might be able to come up with some information on Harper, the police officer who was the main witness. He also was making progress in finding the forensic chemist. We both felt that at least some of the scientific reports had been fudged by the New Jersey State troopers. We talked about this and a million things before the visit ended. He was so positive. He said he had a plan. Everything he wanted to check out. Something he wanted to check out. But he didn't want to discuss it and raise my hopes prematurely. That was the last time I saw Stanley Cohen. A few days later, I received a phone call. Stanley was dead. His body had been found in his home with evidence of trauma. Nobody, with the exception of the police and Stanley's family, knows to this day the cause of death. The newspaper stated Stanley died of natural causes. But a friend of Stanley's, a doctor, told me he had talked to the coroner's office and had been giving conflicting stories. No one knows for sure how Stanley died, and we probably never will. The one thing we do know is that after his death, all the legal papers in my case came up missing. Evelyn talked to Phyllis, Stanley's widow, and she gave her every legal paper she could find that had something to do with my case, but the bulk of the material was still missing. Finally, Evelyn found out that the New York City police had my legal papers. How did they get them? I asked her. I don't even want to think about it, she answered. I could hardly believe all this was happening. It felt so strange. The New York police claimed that they had taken my legal papers from Stanley's house as evidence. Evidence of what? I asked Evelyn. Apparently, my legal papers were the only property of the New York Police Department had removed from his house. It took more than a month to get some of them back. Some were never recovered. None of the notes about the investigator or the forensic chemist were found. All the notes on trial strategy we had mapped out were missing. It was weird. I thought of Stanley's family and what they must have been going through. The circumstances of his death were so strange. I walked around with an empty feeling in my stomach for a long time. After Stanley's death, William Kunstler joined the defense team. The first thing the judge did after admitting Kunstler to the case was rescind an order for state-paid experts, claiming the lawyers had failed to move fast enough to get to them. I became more suspicious than before. I couldn't understand why Appleby all of a sudden was so anxious we not have expert witnesses. It was obvious that without some financial help, I would never be able to afford expert witnesses. I didn't have a thin dime to my name. Appleby's strategy was to completely intimidate the lawyers, to harass them, threaten them until they became fearful of mounting any significant opposition to the legal lynching that was supposed to be my trial. Since there were no funds to pay for anything, the defense committees and the lawyers were forced to launch a fundraising campaign. The first time Bill Kunstler spoke in New Jersey, Appleby attempted to have him thrown off the case, charging him with improper conduct and conduct that was prejudicial to the administration of justice. The improper conduct was giving a lecture at Rutgers University, during which he said that we needed money for expert witnesses, that the conditions of my confinement were detrimental to my aiding in my defense, and that under the law I was presumed innocent until proven guilty. Wow. Appleby's order to show cause why Bill should not be thrown off the case accomplished what it intended. Instead of preparing for a trial, the lawyers were forced to spend time and energy preparing for the 2-day hearing that would determine whether or not Bill stayed on the case. Appleby finally decided Bill would remain, but only after we had spent a month dealing with that madness. The implication of the hearing was clear. Any attempt the lawyers made to defend me would be met with the judge's hostility. Appleby threatened every single one of the lawyers with contempt, not once or twice, but regularly. Lou Myers attended a fundraising cocktail party at which Angela Davis spoke. Someone sent a letter to the U.S. Treasury in Washington, and approximately 10 days later, he was under investigation by the Internal Revenue Service. Evelyn was repeatedly harassed by Appleby. Not one day went by when the so-called impartial judge failed to show his hostility to the defense team. People say that the system works, but what happens when the system is against you? The lawyers uncovered evidence that offices across from the courthouse that they and the defense team were using were bugged. Motions for an investigation were denied. During a press conference, Lennox Hines had the courage to call the trial exactly what it is: a legal lynching in a kangaroo court. Appleby cited him for contempt, and an effort was made to disbar him. Only after he took his appeal to the highest court in New Jersey was he permitted to continue practicing as a lawyer in the state of New Jersey. The trial began on January 17, 1977, the same day Gary Gilmore was shot in Utah. Gary Gilmore was the first person legally executed since the death penalty was struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court in the early 1970s. His execution set the climax for the trial. The judge had denied almost every one of our motions, including my right to defend myself and act as co-counsel, a change of venue, a motion to review Harper's police record, and a motion to introduce evidence that I have been victimized by the government's counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, etc. Even though the National Jury Product had done a study of Middlesex County and had found that 83% of the people had heard about my case in the media, and 70% had already formulated an opinion about my guilt. The court maintained that I could receive a fair trial. The judge said that he would question jurors and make sure that they were fair and impartial. Appleby took great pains to avoid asking potential jurors whether they thought I was guilty, electing to ask them instead whether they could put their opinions aside. He carefully avoided asking their opinions about me, the Black Liberation Army, the Black Panther Party, Black militants, or anything else that had been negatively and biasedly reported in newspapers. The trial lawyers had no right to question jurors. Appleby's voir dire was designed to make sure the most hypocritical, opinionated jurors stayed on the jury. Here are two examples taken directly from the transcript. Question: and have you heard about this case? Answer: yes, I have. Question: from what source may you have heard about the case? Answer: newspapers. Question: what have you discussed, and have you discussed it with other people? Answer: occasionally. Question: and based upon whatever you may have heard from any source whatsoever, do you feel that you have already in your own mind formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant? Answer: well, to be perfectly honest, I think I will be a little biased. Question: let me ask you another question. In the event that you were to be chosen to serve, do you feel that you could sit and listen to all the evidence in the case and then judge it fairly and impartially and apply the law that the judge gives you and put aside completely any previous opinions or conceptions or ideas about anything in the case? And then do you believe that you could render a fair verdict as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant? Answer: I think I could. Question: do you believe that you could? Answer: I think so. Example number 2. Question: do you feel that based upon whether information you may have accumulated about the case from any source whatsoever, that you have already formed an opinion in your mind as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant? Answer: I would think, yeah. I would think that she was guilty, yeah. Question: you feel that she's guilty? Answer: yes. Question: and let me ask you another question. In the event that you might be selected to serve as a juror in this case, do you feel that you could sit and listen to the evidence and judge it impartially, apply the law the judge gives you, set aside this opinion that you have already formed? Answer: yes, I probably could. Question: and then still judge impartially whether she's guilty or innocent? Answer: yeah, depending on the evidence and all that. These were typical of the answers given. The judge refused to remove the above two jurors for cause on the basis of bias that would prevent them from being fair and impartial jurors, and our preemptory challenges were quickly exhausted. Remaining on the final jury were 2 friends, 1 girlfriend, and 2 nephews of New Jersey state troopers. The so-called jury selection process was the biggest farce in legal history. About halfway through the so-called jury selection process, I was ready to call it a day. As bad as this jury sounded, it looked even worse. I didn't want to participate, but almost everyone on the defense team thought not participating was a mistake. If you don't, we'll never get anything on the record. You'll never even be able to convince an appeal court of anything. You got to get up and tell your side of the story. We can prove by the medical testimony that you were shot in the back with your hand in the air. We can prove that Harper shot first. We can prove that after you were shot, your hand was paralyzed, and from the location of his gunshot wound, it would have been impossible for you to have shot him with your left hand. We can prove that Harper shot first. We can prove this if you take the stand. We can prove. I was tired of this case. I damn sure didn't believe that any appeals court was going to free me, or that any racist, white, prejudiced jury was either. It was obvious I didn't have the chance in a million of receiving any kind of justice. The financial problems, expert witness problems, personality problems among the lawyers, in addition to rotting away in solitary confinement, had taken their toll on me. Every day when I entered the courtroom, I felt like I was entering the theater of the absurd. I wanted no part of it. The lawyers said that I could create a political climate which they thought would force the appeal court to give in if I participated in the trial and put on the record that fact that I was innocent. They were convinced that in the last minute of forensic chemists were trying to locate in Canada were going to come in and save the day. I didn't put any stock in that, but I knew that keeping the momentum around going around what was happening was important. I decided to remain and participate, even though it was killing me. The trial went absurdly on. An all-white jury was selected based on the evidence of Kunster and the jury project, who decided even though the jurors seated in the panel was horrible, the others were worse. Not only did the judge deny my motion to act as co-counsel, he refused to permit the lawyers to read my opening statement to the jury. The defense team's headquarters, located in New Brunswick, was broken into, papers rummaged through and stolen, and the judge refused to investigate, calling the motion frivolous. The state's witnesses, almost all of whom were pigs, got up and said whatever they were told to say. We had no expert witnesses to refute or even evaluate their testimony. The main witness, Harper, the state trooper I was supposed to have shot, testified and had told an untruth on direct examination, but denied it was a lie. I spent most of the trial looking up at the ceiling and hating myself for sitting there in the first place. When the time came for me to testify, I was shocked. I had thought I would be able to go into everything, being a fugitive, how I became a fugitive, the entire political scenario that led into being in a courtroom. But then they told me something about opening the door. Opening the door, it was explained, was like opening Pandora's box. If I gave the political reasons for my being a fugitive, the prosecutor could introduce all kinds of prejudicial evidence that had nothing to do with what happened on the turnpike in order to show my criminal intent. If I opened the door, the prosecutor would be able to introduce manuals of guerrilla warfare and a whole stack of other material they found in the car that had nothing to do with this trial. In the absence of political witnesses whose subpoenas for their appearance the judge had refused to issue, who would have testified about COINTELPRO's systematic attack on the Black liberation movement and on Blacks in general, my testimony would have been distorted. I wanted to back out completely, denounce the trial, but it was too late. The only way out was to testify, get my side of what happened on the record, and avoid opening the door. The year of solitary confinement had made me almost mute. As I testified, I held on to the small picture of my child. When I sit back today and examine why I participated in that trial, I think I must have been crazy. I guess I have been through too many trials and gotten too many acquittals and let that stuff go to my head. 3 other indictments have been dismissed. One in Queens State Supreme Court, charging me with killing policemen. One was dismissed because the judge, after examining the grand jury minutiae, determined there was not even enough evidence for me to have been indicted. The other two, one in Brooklyn Supreme Court and the other in Supreme Court in New York County, were dismissed for failure of the state to bring me to trial for 6 years after the indictments had been returned. Participating in New Jersey trial was unprincipled and incorrect. By participating, I participated in my own oppression. I should have known better and not lent dignity or credence to that sham. In the long run, the people are our only appeal. The only ones who can free us are ourselves. So that's chapter 18. Oh my goodness. It's crazy how, when it comes to having to participate in court proceedings, sometimes it feels like it's not even worth it. Because it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And that's the way a lot of people see it, like especially a lot of us Black people in this country. Because a lot of times what will happen is they'll force us with a plea deal so that we won't face that much jail time. But then that plea deal basically means that we confess to being guilty of something that we're not guilty of. And if we go to trial, and if we lose that trial, we actually fare even worse with prison time or jail time. And then on top of that, you have to face bail, which you can't afford. Bail is basically just making it so that you're guilty for being poor. It's just sad. So we're going to go to chapter 19 of Assata Shakur's Autobiography. And if you guys haven't, make sure to give me a like just to push me out into the algorithm. Thank you very much. Chapter 19, starting on page 253. I was transferred on April 8, 1978 to the maximum security prison for women in Alderson, West Virginia, the federal facility designed to hold the most dangerous women in the country. I have been convicted of no federal crime, but under the Interstate Compact Agreement, any prisoner can be shipped like cargo to any jail in the U.S. territory, including the Virgin Islands, miles away from family, friends, and lawyers. Through the device of this agreement, Sundiata had been transferred to Marion Prison in Illinois, the federal prison that was the most brutal concentration camp in the country. Alderson was in the middle of the West Virginia mountains, and it seemed as if the mountains formed an impenetrable barrier between the prison and the rest of the world. It had no airport, and to reach it, days of travel were necessary. The trip to Alderson was so expensive and difficult that most of the women received family visits only once or twice a year. I was housed in a maximum security unit, MSU, called Davis Hall. It was surrounded by an electronic fence topped by barbed wire, which in turn was covered by concertina wire, a razor-sharp type of wire that had been outlawed by the Geneva Convention. It was a prison within a prison. This place had stillness to it, like some kind of bizarre death row. Everything was sterile and dead. There were three major groups in MSU: the Nazis, the nigger lovers, and me. I was the only Black woman in the unit, with the exception of one other who left almost immediately after I arrived. The Nazis had been sent to Alderson from prison in California, where they had been accused of setting inmates on fire. They were members of an Aryan Sisterhood, the female wing of the Aryan Brotherhood, a white racist group that operates in California prisons and is well known for its attack on black prisoners. Hooked up with the Nazis were the Manson family women, Sandra Good and Linda Squeaky Frome. Sandra had been sentenced to 15 years for threatening the lives of business executives and government officials, and Frome was serving a life sentence for attempting to kill President Gerald Ford. They were like the Bobbsey twins and clear out of their minds. They called themselves Red and Blue. Every day Red wore red from head to toe and Blue wore blue. They were so fanatic in their devotion to Charles Manson that they wrote to him every day, informing him about everything that happened at MSU. They waited for his orders, and you can be sure that if he told them to kill someone, they would die trying to do it. Also, they hooked up with the Nazis were the hillbilly prisoners, an obese sow who never bathed and walked around barefoot, and a tobacco-chewing butch who acted like she was in the Confederate Army. There was one independent Nazi who had fallen out with the others. She sported a huge swastika embroidered on her jeans. Luckily, Rita Brown, a white revolutionary from George Jackson Brigade, a group based in the West Coast, was among the 4 or 5 nigger lovers. She was a feminist and a lesbian who helped me to better understand the many issues in the white women's liberation movement. Unlike Jane Alpert, who I had met in the federal prison in New York, and whom I couldn't stand either personally or politically, Rita did not separate oppression from women from the racism and classism of U.S. society. We agreed that sexism, like racism, was generated by capitalist imperialist governments, and that women would never be liberated as long as the institutions controlled our lives existed. I respected Rita because she really practiced sisterhood and wasn't just one of those big mouths who go on and on about men. I'm sure that a lot of prison officials thought I'd never leave the place alive. It was the perfect setup for a setup, and I dealt with the situation seriously. I didn't look for trouble, but I let the Nazis know that I was ready to defend myself at any time, and if they wanted ass, like they say in prison, they would have to bring ass. I made it clear to them that I hated them as much as they hated me, and that if anybody's mother had to cry, it would be theirs, not Mrs. Johnson. Better ask somebody. After a few run-ins, the Nazis stayed out of my way. After I had been to Alderson for a while, we learned that the MSU would be closed down because it had been declared unconstitutional. A phase-out stratification program was implemented that enabled those in MSU to leave it during the day and to participate in the same activities permitted by those in the general population. I got a job working on a general mechanics crew, was allowed recreation, attended classes, and was able to eat and visit with other women in the general population. Many of the sisters were black and poor from DC, where every crime is a violation of a federal statute. There were beautiful sisters serving outrageous sentences for minor offenses. Similar to the situation that exists in the federal prison in New York, some women could not afford to buy cigarettes without foregoing necessities, while others had money, contacts, wore fur coats, and lived as if they were in a different prison. That small group of women had been convicted of drug trafficking. Rumor had it that they had performed the same services in prison as they had done on the street, only now they worked for the guards. One day, as I was returning to Davis Hall, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair caught my eye. She had a dignified schoolteacher look. Something drew me towards her. As I searched her face, I could see that she was searching mine. Our eyes locked in a questioning gaze. "Lolita?" I ventured. "Assata?" she responded. And there, in the middle of those Alderson prison grounds, we hugged and kissed each other. For me, this is one of the greatest honors of my life. Lolita Lebron was one of the most respected political prisoners in the world. Ever since I had first learned about her courageous struggle for the independence of Puerto Rico, I had read everything I could find that had been written about her. She had spent a quarter of a century behind bars and had refused parole unless her comrades were also freed. After all those years, she had remained strong, unbent, and unbroken, still dedicated to the independence of Puerto Rico and in the liberation of her people. She deserved more respect than anyone could possibly give her, and I could not do enough to demonstrate my respect. In our subsequent meetings, I must have been quite a pain in her neck, falling all over myself to carry her tray, to get a chair for her, or to do whatever I could for her. Lolita had been through hell in prison, yet she was amazingly calm, extremely kind. She had suffered years of isolation in Davis Hall, in addition to years of political and personal isolation. Until the upsurge of the movement for Puerto Rican independence in the late 60s, she had received very little support. Years have gone by without a visit. For years, she had been cut off from her country, her culture, her family, and had not been able to speak her own language. Her only daughter had died while she was in prison. I supported Lolita 100%, but there was one thing about which we did not agree. At that time we met, Lolita was somewhat anti-communist and anti-socialist. She was extremely religious, and I think after that religion and socialism were and believed that religion and socialism were two opposing forces, that socialists and communists were completely opposed to religion and religious freedom. After the resurgence of the Puerto Rican independence movement, Lolita was visited by all kinds of people. Some were pseudo-revolutionary robots who attacked her for her religious beliefs, telling her to be a revolutionary, she had to give up her belief in God. It apparently had never occurred to those fools that Lolita was more revolutionary than they can ever be, and that her religion had helped her remain strong and committed all those years. I was infuriated by their crass, misguided arrogance. I had become close friends with a with a Catholic nun, Mary Alice Walla Alderson, who introduced me to liberation theology. I had read some articles by Camilo Torres, the revolutionary priest, and I knew that were a lot of revolutionary priests and nuns in Latin America. But I didn't know too much about liberation theology. I did know that Jesus had driven out the money changers out of the temples and said that the meek would inherit the earth, and a lot of other things that were directly opposed to capitalism. He had told me, he had told the rich to give their wealth and said that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Matthew chapter 19, verse 24. I knew a little bit, but I had too much respect for Lolita to open my mouth carelessly. I decided to study liberation theology so that I can give an intelligent conversation with her, because I can have an intelligent conversation with her. I never got around to it, though. The maximum security unit closed, and I was shipped back to New Jersey. Lolita is free now, and she is no longer isolated from what is going on in her part of the world or in her church. I know that wherever she is praying and struggling for her people. That's chapter 19. So what do you guys think? I'm telling you right now, what Assata went through in those prison conditions, it breaks my heart. But I'm glad she was able to tell us and recount these stories to us to let us know what she was going through. So if Assata Shakur ever gets to see, my series of reading her autobiography, solidarity with you, sis. Definitely. Did you guys like the stream? If you guys have not, then you guys can go ahead and give me a like. I really appreciate it. If you guys also want to, you guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com for email notifications. Just to let you guys know also, thank you so much to the new patrons on Patreon, for all of you who are subscribed to me. And just to let you guys know, if you guys would like to, you guys can also become patrons on Patreon, or you guys can become patrons on Buy Me a Coffee, or send me any type of mutual aid through PayPal. Thank you so very much. And just so that you guys know, there are different tiers on Patreon as well. And so let me share that with you guys. So if you guys would like to, you guys can come JB members, Solidarity, Comrades, Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, and Mega Jaybefaunters. So thank you so very much to any and all who become supporters of the channel. Now, just to let you guys know, if you guys have not been aware already, my monetization has been paused because of the live stream that I did in support for Palestinians. YouTube has gave me a community guidelines warning, and they have paused my monetization. So any type of monetization that I can get is, I am not monetized right now. So if, because of me showing what the idea of what the Israeli military was doing to Palestinians, that for YouTube was a bridge too far. So I'm trying to work past getting my monetization back. If you guys would like to give me any type of support whatsoever, you guys can do it either through PayPal, or you guys can donate through Patreon. Either or is appreciated. I'm really going through it right now. Hopefully I can get the monetization back on my channel. If not, then that it is what it is. I'll try to keep going through patrons on Patreon to offset that, but that's my income, and I'm on a fixed income, and I'm like a hair's breadth above the poverty line, and so it's really tough. So I'm going through it. But if you guys would like to, also, if you guys want something for it as well, I also have a merch store if you guys would like to. So if you guys would like to, you guys can also go to my merch store if you guys want to get something for it. And I shared the link to the merch store as well. If you guys would like to get merch from me, I have merch for that. And so just to let you guys see, I have Leave the World Better Than You Found It. So this is merch that you guys can purchase as well from the merch store. I have this available as well in multiple colors. So if you guys would like to, you guys can actually purchase that merch or that shirt too. I'm gonna try to. I might end up wearing this shirt when I go to the Palestinian rally on Saturday. But yeah, so just to let you guys know, I have that merch available as well. Another thing to also bring up, and I talked about this before, but RBN is doing a mutual aid action in December. Our goal is $3,000. So if you guys would like to, we are going to be raising money for grocery gift cards, toiletries, and warm clothes for the people, for our neighbors, our houseless neighbors here in Orlando. So if you guys would like to, you guys can also go and donate. We have through Cash App, you guys can go $Orlando RBN. And let me share. Let's see. Let me also get the link as well so that you guys can have the link just in case. But yes, so if you guys would like to, you guys can donate for that as well. And if you guys donate, then I will shout you out as well. And to everybody who's already donated, thank you so very much. Really appreciate it, because we have to help each other. We have to help our fellow neighbors, family, and friends. So thank you for that as well. Let me put that in the chat here. and so that people have that. And let me check. I'm not sure if there's anybody watching on Rumble right now, but I will check because I do get people who watch me on Rumble. So I do have people watching on Rumble. That's wonderful. So here is the link to Orlando RBN. So if you guys would like to, you guys can also do that. Also, because I'm demonetized right now on YouTube, any Rumble rants also are appreciated. So just letting you guys know. So thank you very much. So basically, that's it. Because I'm live, I'm going to go to the chat just to say what's up to everybody. We have Pachico Rone. Good to see you. He says, peace. Good to see you, Pachico Rone. All right. Norman Keena. Good to see you. Thank you so very much for coming in. Wadi is in here saying, hey, everybody. Good to see you, Wadi. Jess Tiss says, hey there. I'm late as always, but sending love and good vibes to you. Love that t-shirt, JB. Oh, Justice, that's so close to 3,000. I'm only 4 people away from 3,000. So if you are watching this right now and you're not subscribed, if you guys like my content, then you can go ahead and subscribe, and I appreciate it. But I'm like only 4 subs away from 3,000. Soul Construct, good to see you. It says great readings. Thank you so very much, Soul. Appreciate it very much. Justice says, it's amazing that even though under those conditions, Assata was still endeavoring to expand her knowledge. Absolutely. That is, I'll be honest with you, that is what impresses me the most, and I appreciate that from her. Game.film, much love to you, Game.film. Thank you so much. Creative Experiment says, only like supporters of and yeah. Thank you so very much. I have to be careful about some things I say on here, unfortunately. So yeah. Justice. Oh, that's so nice of you. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. CJB, which route gives you the full or largest amount? Cash App or PayPal. My PayPal is basically the same as my channel name, Jaybefaunt. If you guys want to do it through that, but if you guys do donate, if you guys donate for RBN Mutual Aid, if you guys go through my PayPal, please make sure to put in the notes RBN Mutual Aid. The reason being is because I don't know if it's for me or if it's for RBN Mutual Aid. If it's for RBN Mutual Aid, then I can just reroute it back to, the Cash App so that the money's in there. So, because I want to make sure that I try to keep those separate. That's why there's a separate RBN Mutual Aid, because I don't want my money and their money getting mixed. So that's the reason why. Cowboy Kitty, good to see you as well. Thank you so very much. So yeah, I'm about to head out because I don't want this to be more than an hour. But thank you so very much to everybody. Thank you so much to all the people that have contributed. You guys are amazing group of people who really are a compassionate bunch. And so it really helps me knowing that I have people like you around to support me as I continue to do this type of work. So yeah, I just want to thank you guys from the top and bottom of my hearts. So yeah, I'm gonna head out. And be sure to catch me I'm going to be going live on Saturday from the Free Palestine event here in Orlando. So be sure to be tuned in for that. The event starts at 3. I'm probably going to try to go live around 2:30ish so that you guys can catch me. So yeah, so I'll be doing that, and I cannot wait. So thank you so very much. Like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. All right. Reading is fundamental as well. And look, have joy because joy is revolutionary. And by the way, free Palestine.